Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Ravi Panekka. I lead the team and group coaching community practice for ICF Bangalore Charter Chapter. The duration of today's masterclass is 1.5 hours, with the final 15-20 minutes designated for Q&A. Today's masterclass entails 0.75 CC and 0.75 RD. Participants who attend the full session would be awarded CC certificates by the chapter. Now, let me introduce Susan. Susan has over 20 years of experience at the intersection of leadership organizational learning, workforce development, trauma-informed care, and healthcare technology innovation. She is a professor at Vanderbilt University, where she teaches undergraduate and graduate courses in leadership, team design and management, and organizational performance evaluation. An internationally recognized thought leader, Susan focuses on using feedback to improve practices and organizational learning in the healthcare space. With more than 100 publications and presentations, she has supported organizations worldwide in digital health technology transformation. Guided by user-centered and evidence-based principles, she helps leaders sustain innovation and improve organizational metrics through data-informed decision-making. As a mentor coach and credential supervisor with Renewal Associates for Team Coaching Supervision and EMCC Global ESIA ITCA, Susan helps coaches develop their skills and expand their practices. Her work frequently involves strategic change initiatives, optimizing diverse perspectives, and fostering innovation and leadership. I am both thankful and grateful to you, Susan, for taking the time to host the masterclass on Powering Up the Middle, a systemic coaching approach to strengthening cross-functional teams. A very warm welcome to you, Susan, on behalf of the ICF Bangalore Charter Chapter team and group coaching community of practice. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you so much, Ravi. And thank you to everyone for making time to be together on your evening. It's my morning here in Nashville, Tennessee, in the southern United States. I'm grateful to be here and looking forward to a rich conversation. One of the reasons I teach and one of the reasons I do engagements like this is because I'm always learning, and I look forward to learning from you this evening. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. So this is what we're doing today, and it's a particular focus on the middle of the organization. We'll talk a little bit more about that. You know who I am. Don't need to say any more about that. But maybe just one thing, my background, my original training is in clinical psychology. I was a practitioner and a clinic director leader for many years. And as I made the shift to supporting those who do the work, I realized that I fell in love with the idea of coaching and began my journey in training as a coach in the early 2010s. I'm also been involved in the startup community. We were talking about that before we began the recording, and especially around the use of data in everyday decision making. So I think you'll see that influence through much of what we talk about this evening. I was hoping that we could have just an opening reflection. I'll take this slide down and I'll put these questions in the chat in just a moment. What I'm hoping to do is just get a sense of who you are, what you're curious about. What have you been learning in this series that you are undertaking? And perhaps an even more intriguing question, what are you unlearning as you engage in these master classes in team coaching? So let me stop the share so I can, see all of you better. I'll put those questions in the chat here. Anyone want to go off mute? and share. You're also welcome to use the chat. Ashok Kumar, can I call on you since we already had a little bit of an engagement?
Sure. In terms of what is it that one thing that I would continue to learn or invest my time in learning is skills that will make me a better version of myself. Uh,
Mm,
um, whether it is an incremental move or an exponential move, a move is what I'm looking for. I'm not looking at the sort of shift, degree of shift in that sense.
mhm,
And what am I unlearning? I'm unlearning 30 years of corporate life. Uh,
mm,
because that is something that I've been used to in a certain fashion. So definitely, I want to unlearn that and start looking at a better version of myself is what I'm looking at.
mm. So moving away from how do we take our experience before and both integrate it and spring forward from it
Yeah.
as you become that better version of yourself. Unlearning assumptions. I'm seeing a lot coming up in the chat now. Anyone want to go on microphone and talk a little bit more? Maybe a couple more people.
Um, I think not just through these series, Susan, I think more after I came into the space of coaching. I think
Mm,
what I am learning more is how similar is human experience,
mm,
whether it's in the professional space or in the personal space, whether it is at the leadership or it is in the middle management. Uh, how similar is the experience uh, and how limiting it is for us to experience this world through our thoughts.
mm,
And what I'm unlearning is what seemed like, oh, these are very specific to me. I'm now feeling, oh, it's human. It's just not me. It's, I think, many people who are going through this, and it's very common to feel this.
Sudha, that's really interesting. And I think that's, you'll see that reflected in a framework that I'm going to introduce. Some of you may know it already, but that idea of seeing through a wider lens where it's not just seeing the world through our own eyes, but inviting additional perspectives for that human experience. Thank you. I'm seeing some things in the chat around team dynamics, how team coaching is different from individual coaching, impacting through one conversation at a time. How about one more person? Anyone else want to come on and say a little bit more about what are you learning, unlearning? Satyajit,
Yes.
please correct me.
Hi. Yeah. Correct. Correct. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
Yeah. My learning here is, after a lot of knowledge, qualification, and now entering into coaching, I feel my adult ego state and parental ego state has to, be controlled, and my curious child has to come up. You know. So that is
Mm,
where I am now learning, and unlearning is, there's a realization that the consulting and training is not creating an impact because you have big Google as a teacher.
mm-hmm,
So it is important that we need to unlearn the consulting and training style. And especially in India, still there's a lot of awareness is required to be done for coaching. So probably, there's a lot of scope, to make them realize that we are the mirrors, we are the facilitators. So I am unlearning that consulting and training, which I, got qualified in. But it's a different journey altogether. Coaching.
mm.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. I think, again, you'll see this later in the presentation. Um, and what I encourage all of us to think about is those different modalities in team coaching and how do we, rather than come in as consultants and trainers How do we come in as coaches and then draw from training and consulting to power up coaching rather than the other way around? Kanwal, if I'm saying your name correctly?
Yeah, you can say me KP also with my initials.
KP?
Yeah.
Thank you, KP.
Though this is my first session in this series, what I'm trying to learning it, how to shine that light in those gems everybody is hiding within themselves.
Mm,
Whether it's a team environment, that maybe that relationship gems they have strength in those connections, trying to find that out. And unlearning is, I mean, I don't have any assumptions when I'm looking at those gems. That's unlearning.
mm. So I'm just really feeling that openness. And, perhaps a theme that I think I'm hearing is openness, not just of mind, but also of heart, because we're talking about relationships. Thank you. All right. I am going to jump back into my slides. Thank you for engaging. And my hope is that this continues to be a question for reflection, that you can continue to consider as you go about your evening, as you let some of the things that we've talked about tonight wash over you. Today's roadmap, basically I have 3 sections. This talk is all about middle managers and cross-functional teams. So we'll start with setting up that why. And then we'll briefly introduce some frameworks to expand our systemic coaching approach and conclude by making sure that we are talking about what it looks like to bring competence as a team coach and live within those living ethical boundaries. The key learning objectives we can read later. That'll be in the slides, and it's in the introduction to the talk that was online. So here's where I want to start. And I love that I'm talking to all of you in Bengaluru, which is, as I've been informed, the Silicon Valley of India. And this is probably a familiar phrase to you. The notion that the world is getting more volatile, more uncertain, more complex, and there's a lot more ambiguity that we're dealing with. This has been coined as the VUCA world. And in fact, we've been talking about this for about 15 or so years, and we're beginning to move into more of an anxious chaos kind of a world. But let's stick with the idea of VUCA. What is a common response of an organization who is trying to maintain their business objectives, hold on to their people in the midst of tremendous workforce changes with new generations, and vision cast into a future that is unseeable? I think we can all agree that a lot of organizations are doing this through collecting data, through data dashboards, through trying to get a better handle on what's going on, powering up predictive analytics. So the more data we can have, the better is often what I hear. However, in 2023, Fletcher, Gaines, and Loney, who are some of the people who helped come together to coin the term VUCA, found that decision-making doesn't always improve with more data. If you think about your own experience, you know that to be true. In fact, more data can often decrease our ability to make choices. What these authors found is that it is what they call low data decision making that makes the difference in intelligent leadership in the VUCA world. Low data decision making is not something that we can get through artificial intelligence or technology. This is how the human brain works. Low data decision making is where we need people. So that's a big part of the work that I do, is around helping organizations use data and then doing that through people, building and strengthening people and teams. So that's where middle leaders come into play. Middle leaders are often squeezed between the top of the organization and the bottom. They're feeling those pressures. They're crucial to organizational agility, being able to be nimble, fast on your feet, innovate in a world where you can't see around the corner to tomorrow. It's been said that middle managers are uniquely positioned to translate high-level strategies into actionable plans for their teams. They're closest to where the decisions affect the work on the front line. And one of the key or crucial operating principles for organizations who are trying for agility is to figure out how to push decisions to the level of the work for better input. They also are the navigators of an organization. They navigate across gaps, across functions, across business units. They get creative to find ways to collaborate and to create communication channels, even informal ones. It's often been said they help to break down silos. And then a third crucial role in organizational agility is developing people, coaching new talent, ensuring that their people management is prioritized just as much as their task execution. Yet this is not what we often find in the world of middle managers. They're stressed. Organizations have treated them as largely bureaucratic, rule transveyors. And when there need to be layoffs, the middle level is often the one that gets laid off. However, McKinsey has done some research quite a bit recently, and what they have found is that organizations that can be most responsive to external challenges, who can be most agile, are those that have a strong middle management. So here we can see a couple of graphs where they're talking about how middle managers can drive performance. On the left-hand side, what you can see is from a survey that was done, the McKinsey's Organizational Health Index. They measured different practices that relate to healthy manager behaviors. On the left-hand side, those organizations where managers performed those practices more frequently than others realized anywhere from 3 to 21 times greater total shareholder returns over the last 5 years. So rather than being experienced as bureaucrats and rule followers and box checkers, when you have healthy middle managers who develop talent, who support, consult, challenge, and involve others in creative ways, you have a stronger organization meeting its objectives. On the right-hand side, you can also see that there is a direct correlation across units. When there's greater consistency, that you have managers with these healthy management behaviors across business units, the organization is doing better. So clearly, managers in the middle matter. And it matters when they're consistent across. That's where cross-functional teams comes in. Cross-functional teams are just groups that are composed of members, maybe in different departments in an organization, different verticals. They are representing different functions. And each person brings diverse skills and expertise to work together toward a common goal. Often, these are team leaders of their own teams, or they can be individual contributors or a mix of both. They bring those diverse skills and expertise, and you can hear the definition of a real team here, where they're working towards a common goal. And uniquely associated with a cross-functional team is this role of bridging across silos, which is one of the most common and challenging problems that organizations face, is the gaps that happen in collaboration, in connection, and in communication. So here's where I want to just pause for a few moments. Ravi, perhaps you could create some breakout groups, and we will send you can take a photo of the screen. We'll put these in the chat so you have them. Given your experience as a coach in leadership development, as a team coach, or in other roles that you may hold, what are some common signs that you've noticed that signal organizational silos are impacting team performance? And what strategies have you found effective in helping teams break down those barriers? What we could do is maybe give this about 10 minutes in your breakout rooms, and then have you come back. Let me just copy this into the chat. Oh, are people already leaving? There we go. Maybe 2 or 3. Oh, thanks, Ravi. So everyone's back from break. I hope that was an engaging and interesting conversation. Let's hear from a few of the groups. You were talking about signals that organizational silos are impacting team performance, and any strategies that you found effective in helping teams break down those barriers. You're welcome to share any thoughts in the chat, and I'd love to hear from some of you on the microphone. Who wants to speak for their group?
Okay, can I?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we had a very interesting conversation with Satyajit, Beena, Ajay, and Aarti and me. And we're talking about different strategies too. So one strategy is to just get them together and help them to just vomit it out and, say, okay, what are your issues with the other person? Another strategy could be have them to swap roles. Other strategies could be like helping them to network, periodic, without work, just get together like a Friday, get to know each other type of a thing with some fun activities, and automatically things happen. So interesting. And what I wanted to share was one experience that I had in a huge corporation where 2 teams were working on the same product, not knowing that they were working on the same product for more than a year.
Really?
Yeah. And
Who
it's a
else?
huge
Yeah.
organization. One of
Who
these
else has
like
come across something like that? Yeah. I see a couple hands raised where there are these gaps that are so significant you don't even have. Sushma, thank you. I'm hearing some coaching interventions, some team coaching interventions, a walk and talk, just to get to know each other, a walk in your shoes, to take on new perspectives, getting to know one another. I think I saw a hand. Was that you, Shivani?
Yes, I was just agreeing to what Sushma just said, and it kind of recalled me my memory also. This is so true. One of the points that we discussed and I did mention, people do not know where are they contributing and where are they working and where is their efforts going. So that is what happened. They are working on the same thing, but they are absolutely not aware.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was a wonderful conversation also in our group wherein Venkatesh and other people talked about how these things come up, and then people start this blame game and looking for only their teams and their whatever they have to do and forget about others. And it's always not me, but you. It's not I, but you. And that thing came up. I think the lack of one of the strategies that they beautifully mentioned about is shared values. Coming together. And I think it was beautifully mentioned by Sushma and others earlier that how can you bring people together and know together? Because until unless they do not know that we are together, they will not have those shared values. And acknowledgement was another beautiful point Raki had said in our group, because people lack those acknowledgement, and because they are not getting acknowledged at certain point, my idea is that is the reason they think what is in it for me. And when they are not aware of that, then they are not even thinking beyond where is my work contributing. So it is like the same product, or at the end, the same company. So it can be maximum 10 products, 10 services, or 100 products, 100 services, but at least I need to know where am I in the value chain. So yeah, a couple of beautiful things came up.
Shivani, and I just appreciate how you brought in that us versus them, that blame game. And I can imagine we can all connect to that somewhat. When we get thrown into a new group, have you ever had the thought, hey, what about me? What are my interests? How am I going to be protected here? And so that's going to be part of the model that we'll talk about, is starting with that explicitly and recognizing that's part of how we come at this as humans. This goes back to our earlier conversation about the beauty of humanity. Vibhu, I see you, and then Bina, and please correct my pronunciation if I am not saying your name correctly.
Yeah, so, no, you're right. My name is Vibhu, and
Vibhu.
what I want to talk about is the organization, specifically the corporate ones, are meant to be competitive, and that competitiveness comes into the citizens of corporate. That means the employees. All that also comes into the team, and which creates the competitiveness towards the rewards, towards the share of acknowledgement, towards the completion of the task and others. Possibly what we need to understand, and the team needs to understand, that competitiveness is outside and not inside. And if we do it inside, we are losing outside. I would say outside means outside the corporate, outside our organization. So that's possibly a strategy towards it, is something that possibly can be a supportive.
Vibhu, thank you. You're making me think of a phrase that I've heard in my leadership circle profile training, that when we're on that reactive side of leadership, we're playing not to lose something that we're protecting. And when we're playing in that creative, cooperative, collaborative, open space of leadership, we are playing to win, because we're all coming around a common goal. Thank you. Bina.
Hi. So, one of the things while we were discussing this entire, these questions, one thing that crossed my mind was a lot of times people are working in silos, given the fact that sometimes within the system, things that are happening are quite haphazard, in the sense, I've had situations where people are not even aware that oh, my organization has this process in place, or we can use this system. So sometimes it is very, very system based or culturally driven, which is why people are working in silos also.
Absolutely. Bina, y'all, thank you so much, everyone. This is just wonderful, and it feeds into a couple of the frameworks that I want to share. Bina, what I'm hearing from you is being aware of larger system influences.
Yes.
Both within the organization and outside. It can lead to a lack of transparency. It can also have us be mirroring some of the cultural influences that we might see coming to us from the top or from the bottom. For middle managers, if you just stop and bring a middle manager to mind, whether it's someone that you've worked with or talked with someone else about, what have you heard them say? Often they see themselves as protecting the front line from the chaos, from the rules, from the lack of understanding and relevance that might be coming from policies from the top. So they see themselves as gatekeepers. And then when they're working with their senior leadership and top leadership teams, they might see themselves as simply needing to take in and enforce a policy rather than being able to have a voice in how it gets implemented, where their ability to connect with the front line, to know what decisions need to be made, to get that really important input from the people who do the work. It doesn't get to be voiced and a part of that strategic decision making. So beautifully done. And this certainly goes back to other of the presentations in this team series around systemic influences and how to think about the larger ecosystem of an organization. Thank you. Seeing some things in the chat as well. Ravi, is there anything there that you would pull out in particular? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Ajay says the concept of one team which comes from the values.
Mm.
And KP, in fact, would you like to unmute and share your views, KP?
Yeah, sure. So that's what we discussed in the breakout room, that there are signs, there are behaviors. People are not speaking much when they are in the meetings. No conflicts are happening. Nobody is challenging anybody. And there is a less of psychological safety probably. And we're trying to put everything under the carpet. I'm not challenging the authority, not speaking up with my own ideas. And if somebody is speaking on the idea, the others are not building on their points, not acknowledging them. So these are the signs probably. And we also have very less of informal gatherings. So probably one step moving ahead from this would be you start having those informal gatherings, meet heart to heart, not just always talking cognitively. Yeah.
Thank you, KP. Yes, a lack of conflict doesn't mean that there is a healthy relationship or healthy conflict. That's what we want to see. And psychological safety is built for that. It's the ability to show up, make mistakes, and not be ridiculed for what I'm doing or what I'm saying. It allows us to make intelligent failures, which is how organizations stay agile and innovate, especially in complex environments. Satyajit, if I'm saying your name.
I just wanted to add a different school of thought, because I handle unions and groupism and all. So as what Kitty said, and I have seen that this is one way of looking at it. The another way where the top management looks at why such situations created. The top management feels that there should not be a groupism, unionism, and they all should not get united and go against the decision. And so for that, creating silos, breaking them, following, we always in India following a British policy, divide and rule, you know. So that is where the type of culture the top management tries to bring in. And that is another school of thought. That's why such situations create. So, I mean, how do we balance it out, these two? What is that framework which can help to balance it out, the two, have the synergy rather than a group business. So, that's what the challenge is in India, especially.
Beautiful addition to the conversation. And let's keep that in mind as we move forward in the slide deck. When you're working with an individual in an organization, or even when you're working with a team or multiple teams, they still live within that larger system. And regardless of what you're doing on an individual or team basis, how do you take into account the evolution that could occur at the organizational level, especially when you have a cultural norm of this is the way we do things here? All right. Feel free to continue to speak up, please. Come off mute, put your thoughts into the chat. I'm going to go ahead and dive back into the slides. Let me just move the chat out of the way. There we go. Okay, thank you for that enriching conversation. And I think I've selected the wrong screen here, and I'll get the right one. Okay, there we go. So talking about some of those signs that silos are impacting team performance, they don't know what's happening. They're not able to make great decisions because they don't have the information that they need. They might not be engaging in healthy conflict and collaborating at the level that they could. And it talked about many strategies that you have found effective. Let's put those in the framework of boundary spanning leadership. So let me see if I can just get a bigger screen here so I can see more of you. Has anyone heard of the concept of boundary spanning leadership before? All right. This is something that we have been incorporating into our model of systemic team coaching through Renewal Associates, GTCI, Peter Hawkins, Catherine Carr, and others. So let's just break it down. What does boundary mean to you? Anybody? Feel free, put it in the chat. What is a boundary? What comes to mind? Yeah, Satyajit.
Yeah, so, there's a limit to everything, so we need to stop there and wait, keep patient, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, limits. Yes. Vibhu.
Boundaries for context of a team and me, the way it appears is the norms, the rules of the game.
Mm-hmm.
What is acceptable and what is not acceptable? To what is the limit? So that comes to my mind when you say boundary.
Yes, and I'm seeing some other things too around a comfort zone, a zone of influence, territory, constraints. Shivani.
So I'm not sure if it is in the context that I'm thinking, but boundary to me can also be bringing people where they are required to be, the balance, the alignment required.
So they can be in the right place.
In the right place, because to me, boundaries does not has to be always the outer ring, it can be always also. Yeah. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah. And that's the way, just simply put, we have a boundary between us, a geographic boundary, where we are living in two different places in the world. Thank you. So what about the word span? AJ, would you be willing to jump into that one? What does the word span mean to you?
So I think I got it a little late, but what I was talking about is the boundary is basically in an organization, people want to control how the teams work, because there's a certain time and certain work which needs to be completed within that. And that's where you create those boundaries, the way I look at it. And which helps you focus on that. You have different people doing different jobs. They might have other skills as well, but at certain point, they're focusing on one. And that is where the boundaries are, kind of defined. In terms of span, if I look at it, I think it's about that this is where, to the extent you can reach out, this is the space you can work in, and probably beyond that you try and see what else you can do. But within this project, for example, this is the space, this is your responsibility, this is where you come up to do the job. That's from how I see it.
That's well said. And to take what you just gave us, that rich example around, it's really what it looks like. Boundaries are, I'm not saying they're negative or positive. So they're divisions, they're differences. And span or spanning is, I got the sense of someone looking across as they're doing their work, they're looking across. They might be connecting with someone else around a project. Yes, Sundar, from and to. So boundary spanning leadership is simply enacting leadership wherever there are limitations and borders. And the goal is that higher vision, that common purpose. Donna Crobot Mason, who helped to develop this framework back in 2010, spoke to my class last semester. She said that she developed this model because she was interested in how do we bring leaders together. She was interested in inclusive leadership and optimizing diversity. So that's where boundary spanning leadership came along. So leaders need to work across all of those divisions, separations, and borders, all of those limitations. And they need to use all of their skills to span, to work across and connect, to help us reach more people, to learn that we have two teams working on the same product. So it can be really concrete things, as well as some that are more relational. So it's easy in principle, but it's hard to do in practice. The types of boundaries are several, and we've talked about some of them here. You can have vertical boundaries through different levels of a hierarchy, where you might have what we call a command and control or hub and spoke kind of organization, where the leadership is saying what we do, and those in the levels below are enacting it. You can also have horizontal boundaries, which is the silos that we were talking about, that can be different functions or departments. There's also boundaries between who belongs within the organization and our customer, competitors, industry leaders. So those kind of stakeholders who are external. We have demographic boundaries around diversity, people who think differently than one another, who come from different cultural backgrounds, and then geographic. What I think is interesting, and the reason why I have been using this model and really trying to learn more about it and put it into practice as a systemic team coach, is the way it starts. And this goes back to some of our earlier conversation, that when we are brought into a group, we want to protect, we want to mitigate risks, we want to be able to keep our budget intact. We start coming together in that us versus them way. That is human behavior. And within any system, it's sensible. If I give away some of my budget, I might not get it next year. So it makes sense to be protective. When we pull people together to collaborate and connect in cross-functional teams, often the very first mistake we make is not starting with buffering. What is uniquely valuable about the boundaries that exist and celebrating those differences before bringing people together? So one of the strategies I heard before was that idea of a walk and talk, just simply walking with one or two others. What do you do? What do I do? And being able to learn about each other. That's a way of reflecting and connecting. But buffering has always got to be something that's on our minds at the beginning of team formation and throughout. How do we protect that team, that cross-functional team? Mobilizing and weaving are really where you are coming together around that shared community and that common purpose. This is where you're blending across those boundaries. You're spanning. The team is starting, if you have a blue team and a green team, they're starting to come together in a patchwork where you can still see the strength of those, but you also see the strength of their commonalities and common purpose. And then the last key practice is transforming, where you've brought this team together, you've created this trust in the process because of that protection along the way. And people are now feeling that they can engage in the wild ideas and the intelligent failures, which is what we must be able to have for innovation to occur and to stay ahead of simply fixing today's problem, and instead being able to innovate for tomorrow's world that we don't even know. And then as you're thinking about strategies connected to that approach, you're also doing that within a larger system. Culture change, I think this was John Cotter, said, culture change requires more than one leader. It requires a coalition of committed individuals working together. I've heard it said before, we don't change a culture one leader at a time. And what I've noticed in a lot of the work that I'm doing now is hearing from folks that while we might be doing training and consulting or coaching with individual leaders, we don't have a cohesive strategy. How does this connect to our larger organizational vision and mission, and ultimately our performance goals? So I think of this in a shorthand as the both and of team coaching and team of team coaching. I don't know if this terminology is familiar to any of you. The team of teams approach is something that came from work by General Stanley McChrystal when he realized back during the Iraq and Afghanistan conflict that his highly trained, highly resourced fighting force was losing. And they were losing because they had strict chain of command controls in place. Information was not being shared in real time, and needed data was not accessible to the people closest to the work. And over time, he's built this model to be this idea of balancing the benefits of that hub and spoke or chain of command model with more networked, chaotic, informal communication and collaboration by laying them both together. So rather than one or the other being better, it's how do we benefit from both? How do we create strategies with teams at different levels to connect outside of the channels in order to get the work done while maintaining the clarity that you get from having clear roles and reporting responsibilities? So let me talk a little bit about an example, and then I want to pause and see what questions that you have. There's a book coming out, Peter Hawkins and Catherine Carr, on this idea of a systemic team of teams approach, where you're working with individual teams and across teams, where the goal is to understand that to have greater impact, we need to work both within and across. Over the last 9 months, I have been working with a behavioral health and human services organization here in the United States. It's across 9 different states. Each of our states has different accreditation, different rules, different policies. There are over 80 different locations with 2,000 plus employees. And the CEO and I began talking almost actually about a year ago in October, that in order to see this company that she loved so much transform and strengthen for the future, her goal was to strengthen the leadership culture. And as we talked together about what this engagement could look like, we decided that powering up the middle, focusing on the middle managers who are under the most stress and could benefit the most from that leadership development. And this happened through one-to-one coaching and using a 360 leadership assessment to guide the individual coaching that was linked to their mission, vision, and values around the leadership behaviors they were trying to implement. But within that would be one leader at a time. So how do we have a greater organizational impact? So we went out to that second level. This is a company, because of the way it's developed, it has grown through acquisitions and many acquisitions over time, that there was not much of a teaming culture that was present. And they did an experiment where they created 2 middle-level teams, a corporate services team made of those different corporate functions with a team leader from each, HR, IT, development, compliance, etc. And then an operations team of the state level operators from each one of these states. We used boundary spanning leadership from the very beginning as we brought people together in a new way for the first time. Why are we here? How is this going to influence my domain? How am I going to be protected in all the other things I need to do to also begin contributing across boundaries? We provided systemic team coaching together with a co-coach over the period of 9 months, helping them form as a team, build their team culture, come together around a common purpose, navigate towards healthy conflict, and engage with their stakeholders, always being driven by future forward and outside in perspectives. Who are we doing the work for? Yet, we didn't stop there.
Ajay has raised his hand.
Oh, thank you. I thought, AJ, your hand had stayed raised. Do you have a question?
No, I think it stayed raised. Sorry
Oh,
about that.
okay. Thank you. No worries. No worries. So as you can see, we're building within these layers, working with individual leaders to their teams, and then with the entire leadership structure at the company as a whole. As we were working together, we remained agile as coaches. We met often with our sponsors to learn what is the impact that's being felt from this leadership development, from these teams that are building and strengthening, and what more is needed. We developed a supervisor community of practice with C-suite and senior leader supervisors for these 20-something individual leaders. So we could raise to them the themes that could drive how they were providing support and understanding the ripples of change and what was possible as the organization is transforming from the middle out. We had two, what we call team of teams events, one at the beginning of the engagement where we brought 70 people together in person to experience connection, to use a human-centered design approach to developing leadership that is specific to them, and to think about what it would be like to have these teams. We had our last team of teams meeting in August, virtual, where the teams presented on their journey happened and what they wanted to be possible moving forward. And it was a transformative event. In meeting with the CEO and our sponsors afterward, she said it hit her between the eyes what was possible when we strengthen cross-functional teams in the middle of the organization. The decisions that were not happening, the information that was not flowing, the communication that was disjointed. She had started to see the shifts. So it's just beginning, the ripples of change that are happening within this organization. One of the middle leaders reported afterward that they've grown as a more cohesive unit. They have more growth ahead, but now they have a roadmap that they didn't have before. So just stopping there, and this is a case study that we're still writing and will be coming out soon. What's coming up for you as you think about individual coaching together with team coaching, and then this larger systemic team of teams approach? What resonated for you, or what questions do you have? And then I have just one or two more slides where we can touch on ethics and competencies.
Go ahead,
Satyajit.
Satyajit.
Yeah. So, sir, I just wanted to ask because that when you started this process, I'm sure the top CEO had an acceptance of that. How did you create an acceptance down the line? So that what you're going to do, and create that type of awareness so that they support it, and what type of empowerment was given to you? That is what I wanted.
So what I heard was, how did we enable acceptance down the line?
Correct.
Yes,
Correct. And
that's
the empowerment to you from the CEO, and the empowerment given by the CEO. Both roles are important, right? I mean, you have been introduced by the CEO, and so there may be some communication from the CEO. Can you just throw some light on that?
Yes. So yes, at the very beginning in the in-person offsite, we held what we call a fireside chat. The CEO, the CFO, and the COO were all up on the stage. And we asked them questions about coaching, about leadership, and about connecting what's disconnected. So they heard it from her first. And to be quite honest, think about what contracting has looked like for each of you when you're coming into a new engagement. The CEO had such a positive experience in a group coaching setting that she wanted to bring this to her leaders. So she was a real champion. Over time, getting that acceptance down the line was not a linear path. There were many stops and starts. Another aspect of this case study that we'll be sharing came from one of our sponsors in a final interview when she was able to say very clearly, we weren't sure that this was working about in the middle of our engagement. They were hearing a lot of discomfort, disconnection, and confusion, especially from one of the teams. Through that process, we were able to hold them that this is developmentally where that team is at. And we did that through a lot of trust. I've actually been working with this organization in different capacities for about 6 years now. And so we were able to build on and borrow from that trust along the way. Did that answer your questions? All right.
Yes, trust is important. I think you play that important role. And I am sure all those doubts, fears, and discontent, you also trusted your process. So that's the most important thing.
Yes. Yes. And, think about what it's like to be a coach and to hold that discomfort. Remember, the goal doesn't belong to us. It belongs to our clients. And so it was continuing to be able to hold trust in the process, the container of coaching that we were building, while our sponsors, our individual leaders, and our teams were guiding the direction and holding that goal. From that, maybe, I think it can make sense. Let me just jump into this last slide that I have, because I want to link it directly to ethics. And, just consider what it's like to work across levels like this. And you'll see on the ICF website for team coaching, they talk about a range of team development modalities from left to right, where the coaching approach is the one that's longer term. It's more about the process is more about partnering. It's all of those things that we know on the right-hand side. At times, however, and as we did, you will be engaging in team building, a little bit of training. For example, we would include in our monthly coaching meetings, as we're listening to their needs, specific topics around strategic collaboration, leading through change. Lightly held, so it wasn't training or consulting, to facilitate the conversation and the connection. So if you think about ethical practice, that first ICF competency as a team coach, it means that you're always, if you're working with an individual team leader, you're seeing through them to the team. And as we worked with each team, we would see them as the unit and see through them to the larger organization and their stakeholders. That's the systemic approach. My co-coach and I were always very intentional about distinguishing between which modality we were going to use. Is this a moment for consultation? How do we bring it back to coaching? And having the knowledge and skill to be able to range and flex across those modalities. And then the trust and the transparency and clarity of holding multiple roles required a great deal of intentionality and reflective practice from my co-coach and I. As a consultant, and I don't know if any of you have held a consultant role, either externally or internally, what are you there for? You're there to know first and know best. As a coach, you are not there to supply the direction, you're there to partner in the journey. So we were constantly reflecting together, leaning into each other, and we had our own individual and group supervision practice to support us in navigating the complexities of this kind of work. So let's get to questions. We have about 10 minutes left. I also want you to know these are 4 of the resources, the thought leaders that are out there that we use to guide the work that we've been doing in this area. I'm also a senior advisor for the McChrystal Group. This is a new McKinsey book on middle managers, Peter Hawkins' work on systemic team coaching, and then Chris Ernst and Donna Crobot Mason's book on boundary spanning leadership. There's lots of resources for each of these that are available online as well. All right. KP.
Yeah. This question that may be related to this session, or I just have a curiosity to know. I read a book from Peter on systemic coaching, wherein he's talking about we have missed out on the environment factors earlier, environment, social, and governance. And normally when we are doing a team coaching, the agenda is for the team. We are not bringing our own agenda. So let's say I'm a passionate coach who is very passionate about sustainability. And though during the team, I can help them reflect what are the influences coming from that peacock feathers, some other influences out of their family system, out of other systems. But nowhere if I find anything coming from an environment factor. But I also want to bring that, I would say, expand the boundary to also consider the environmental factors. Still, I don't want to force my agenda there, but still I want to consider.
KP, I love this dilemma. Is it your agenda? And that's that slide I showed about shifting from I know best and first. Sorry, my dog is wanting some attention, to partnering. Is it your agenda that we are all breathing the air on this planet? That's what Peter would say, and I have heard him say. How do we bring the ecology into the coaching sphere? It's already there. So rather than it being our agenda, just as earlier, so many of you were able to talk about things that you were seeing happening in teams and how they were impacted by the larger system. That's not your agenda. It's your noticing that can offer it up as part of the work. And it's noticing the systemic influences. Tammy Turner talked about complex adaptive systems, and these are all already part of our systems. Does that address the issue to some degree? I think it's a personal journey, and it's one where supervision and reflective practice are critical for us to maintain that outer awareness, that systemic lens, and have it not be our agenda coming from us. KP, back to you.
Yeah, it may require more reflective practice, though there is always a thought when I try to do this systemic coaching, the judgment comes. This is my agenda. I want to bring in that point of environment also. It always, distract me from really doing the team coaching or the one-on-one coaching. Yeah, using a systemic perspective. Yeah.
Thank you, Beena.
Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for that really built a lot of awareness. And so I have a question, because I'm not sure if I got it correct, but what I understood during the last one or two slides is that there are other range of development activities that you might need to bring in into the entire team coaching space, right? And some of them could include training, some of them could include some sort of a team building initiative or so on and so forth. As a coach, where do I draw the line? In the sense, these are not things that I will probably, because for me, in my case, let me give you an example. While I'm a coach, I'm also a trainer. I also facilitate. So where do you draw the line? And therefore, do you need to involve other people in the process so that there is a boundary, or rather a demarcation of roles?
That's
I
a
don't know if you
great
got
question.
Yeah, okay.
No, yeah, I think your question was how do you transition? How do you
Correct.
choose? How do you make those
Yes.
choice between?
Absolutely. Yes.
And that's what I love so much about team coaching, is the complexity of it. It requires us, and as I've heard many people say, you become part of the system as you lean into the team. You lose that objectivity as the outside coach because of the complexity of the relationships and working with a team as a unit. And it requires practice in being able to lean out and see the team as a system. What is it that would be most impactful in this moment?
Okay.
And then leaning out and remaining as the team coach. I've heard Catherine Carr talk about systemic team coaching as having this range and flex that you can see. Thank you, Ravi, for putting the team coaching competencies in the chat. This table is on page 3 that shows these different modalities. So Beena, as a facilitator, that might be a first choice, and it's learning what's influencing, just like KP's question.
KP was, yes.
Is this my influence, my bias? How do I facilitate as a coach? And how do I continually shift back to that team coaching as the primary modality?
Thank you.
All right, looks like we have just a couple more minutes. I know some people are needing to drop. Ravi, do you have anything that you need to use this time for, or can we have more questions?
Oh, yes, certainly. Satyajit has raised his hand.
Yeah, I
Hey,
just
Satyajit.
wanted, Susan, I just wanted those 4 book slides. Wanted to click the photos of that, which you showed that slide.
Oh, yes. Which one?
The last slide.
The
4 books.
resources. Yeah.
Oh, with the books.
Yeah, I just wanted to click the. I'm sure I like reading books,
Oh, good. Me too. You can tell. That's not a Zoom background.
Yeah. Thanks.
You're welcome. And I will provide a PDF of the slides to Ravi as well.
Sure. To have a small request before we close, can we all come on video and we take a quick picture? Sudha, can you help me with a quick screenshot?
Yes, I did, Ravi. You want me to move to the next
WhatsApp.
slide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have
Thank
2
you,
more
everyone.
minutes. Yeah, we have 2 more minutes. If nobody has any questions, then we can probably close.
Susan, may I ask one more question? Is that
Sure.
okay?
Yes, of
Yeah, okay,
course.
I just wanted to know if we had to start reading a particular book, because I know there are a lot of books on, team coaching.
Mhm.
And I know Peter Hawkins typically is the first, that ranks in those names. But if you could recommend something that, one can start reading, what would that be?
One book that you could start reading. Honestly, the book that Tammy Turner recommended.
Sorry, Susan, I just wanted to add what Baby said. In Indian context, what book we should read?
In the Indian context. That's a great question. And that's where I think being able to get a book where you have multiple authors, ideally, is going to be a place to start. I don't know how many of those authors are going to be representative of your Indian context. That is a good question, which means that there needs to be some translation of this work that occurs. So we can be able to get better. The more we're able to take some of these principles and apply them in different contexts, we start to learn the universals. And we learn what it looks like to tailor them well to different contexts, which if we can find ways to transfer that knowledge back, so maybe you all need to be part of the next book, then that's going to make us better at innovating in the future. That's that knowledge transfer that's often missing. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for giving up part of your evening to be here together. I will be in touch with Ravi. Please feel free to reach out and let's stay connected.
So I'm both thankful and grateful to you, Susan, for such an insightful session. Thank you, coaches, for joining us this evening and for collaboratively shaping the learning experience. Our next team and group coaching community practice is scheduled for October 21st at 6 p.m. And we look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you so much, Ravi, and everybody.
Thank
Thank you,
Suzanne,
Susan. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Susan.
you.
Thank you, Ravi.